my second goal, I didn't know how to like frame this one up. So I just kind of framed it up as like refinancing for borrowing power. So with going on such a tear, I'll call it a tear. I'm going to go on such a tear, Charlie. Like the one thing that I'm very aware of is that the borrowing landscape is subject to change, right? Like over the last 12 months, I have seen other people's borrowing capacities just shrink like crazy.
There's no need to throw shots and twist knives on this call.
But it's
how
just,
dare you?
did you like that? That was straight at someone. We won't mention names. And I just looked at this and I'm like, I can't control this. But I also can't control like business has been doing well. What happens if business doesn't continue doing as well? And so I'm looking at how can I continue to mitigate a borrowing being a limiter, which I think is one of the biggest limiters for my accumulator year. And so I'm just looking everywhere that I possibly can to mitigate the potential risk for having limited borrowing power. And so that's literally the goal.
I love this as a second goal. I don't think a lot of people know this, but the banks actually update their lending policies every month.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, so a good mortgage broker, their role is to actually be on top of what lending is available at what times and to who and under what conditions. And it's just like a matrix.
Yep.
And to make a point on that is that when I first started property investing, CBA hated me. Like they wouldn't give me a loan. And then a year later, I'm their ideal type of client based on the risk profile they're wanting on their book. And then I changed to NAB. Like now NAB is like, no, come and play. And I'll give you a really stark difference. I went and had my borrowing power done at one point, and it was like CBA had gone from loving me to like literally like you can have another $1 million to like, all right, you can have 500 grand. And then we had our borrowing power done with NAB, and they're like, yeah, you can have 2.7 million.
It's insane, isn't it? Like, yeah.
So for a lot of people, when they get the word no for borrowing, they think, oh, I'm done. Where it might just literally be, I'll be back in 30 days.
This is the thing. And it fascinates me how much banks change on their remit of we want more customers, we want to retain customers and the types of products that they release in order to do those things. Where, yeah, to your point, like literally you wait 30 days and they could come out with a new product, they could change an existing product, which turns a pretty meek situation into a great opportunity. And he's like, oh, and that is the difference of having a great mortgage broker on it.
So what does refinancing for borrowing power mean for you versus what would be refinancing for something else mean for someone else? And I'm happy to use myself as the counter example after, but I think this is a really interesting point. So what does refinancing for borrowing power mean?
So I'm going to put a couple of layers to this one. So for example, on borrowing to purchase new properties, because I'm in an accumulation stage and I understand what that is going to mean to my cash flow of my portfolio, I don't care if I'm getting mortgages at like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% because I know I just need to go and acquire properties. Right.
Okay, so to use that as an example, you're going on this run here with your 4 properties. Yep. If the bank goes to you, cool, you can buy another property at 9% when all your other rates are at, let's say, 5 or 6. You're going to take that deal to get the purchase.
Exactly. I don't think it will happen, but I have played those numbers both mentally and on spreadsheets, and I'm like, I can support it. Like it's no problems at all, and it aligns to my greater goal. But on the other side is I've looked at the existing mortgages in the portfolio, and I've gone, how do I make these mortgages not impact my potential future borrowing power? And so I'm actually got my mortgage broker at the moment is going through and refinancing a couple of my mortgages down to lower rates so that essentially the property cleans itself even better. So then it's more positively cash flow because it has less expenses, which means that my borrowing power goes up, but also my existing investment portfolio does not impact my future borrowing power.
Can we use an example of that as well? I just want to make sure I get it. Let's say you've got a loan with one of the big 4.
I can tell you the exact example. So I had a loan with a third-tier lender to acquire a property last year, and with all of the interest rate increases, it has gone up to 6.99% at the moment, which is not the end of the world, but it's not.
No, I think it is. I think that's outrageous.
And I was tell you the other one. So then I had another one with a top-tier bank at 6.7%.
Wow, that is high for the current environment.
Very high. And these again, not financial advice for anyone else. So these properties are in trusts, which obviously adds to it, and they're interest only, which adds to it and stuff like that. So we actually went out to a other bank and we got approval for a 5.5 mortgage on each one. So same bank, but they're just two different mortgages. So it's taking literally one from 7% down to 5.5 and another one from 6.7% down to 5.5, which just think about when you've got like $300,000-$400,000 mortgages sitting on these places, like the cash flow changes when you're changing like 1.5%.
So let's just pretend it averages out at 1.25%.
Yep.
So the idea being is you've found a way to save 1.25% on the interest.
Yep.
And then the other side of that is that goes direct to profit. So your profit on the property has gone up. So in the eyes of the bank, when you go and do future lending, you go, look, I've already got this asset. It's even more profitable now, and in turn will give you more borrowing power.
Totally. And even from the risk mitigation perspective, if the RBA comes out and increases rates a couple more times this year, I can wear that pain easier.
Did you consider fixing any loans for that reason?
I did, and I do have a fixed rate mortgage at 2.65% off the top of my head, or 2.45%, which is great. And I'm just looking at this now and I'm like, I think this is probably where it roughly settles. I think the rates might go up an extra 0.5%, give or take. So I'm like, I just don't want to play that game of trying to bet against the RBA because they've done some weird things. So no, I've just stuck it with variable. And I also know that if I fix my rates, I can't get out until the end of the period. And I'm kind of stuck on my current one.
As I say, you know exactly what will happen. You'll lock in at like 6 or 5 or something. It'll go down to 2 just because you did it.
Dude, you know what? Philip Lowe will sit there and say, Grant locked in. You know what? Screw him. Let's drop rates. And I'm like, come on, Mr. Lowe, help a man out.
Well, do you know, I'm not sure whether to call this a sub-goal or a goal of itself, because it appears to me that this is very in line with the major goal of being the accumulator. So let's just say the theme of 2023 is to be the accumulator. So you've got your goal and plan up the top there, and then you've looked at this and gone, well, the goal around my financing structure and refinancing needs to support that as well. And I really look at it how like counter it is. On one hand, you'll take bad finance to get an acquisition, but then on the other side, you're trying to make good finance on your existing properties to improve profitability, to improve borrowing power again. And that, as a strategy, it works. But for a lot of people, they wouldn't necessarily realize that might be what it would take to acquire properties.
Completely. And the way that I think about these two goals is, one is like an expansion strategy. So like expand it. The other one is making sure that whatever the expansion is, moving things in, like expansion grows and grabs things and push it back into like a business as usual. And I just need to make sure the business as usual things aren't ruining the expansion, because a lot of people just miss the second order consequences where they'll expand and they'll buy something, they'll buy this asset, but they didn't realize that actually by buying that asset, it inhibits their ability to buy another one. Whether they over leverage themselves, whether the interest rate was too high and now it doesn't help them out for borrowing, whatever the situation may or may not be, my key thing is like, now that I acquired it, how do I make sure it doesn't get in the way for the next one?
It's so such a critical question. You just described exactly what happened with our development I mentioned earlier, because we had not forecasted the idea that if you buy a property and you do a development, you may not be able to borrow more money until you've finished that development and had it revalued.
Exactly, because you got to wait.
And there's opportunity costs. We literally could have bought more property in that time if we'd have bought established properties instead of buying there, or instead of buying that one. Although it did turn out well. We can't argue that the end result didn't turn out well.
But that's the challenge, right? And I know that if I was to do something similar, I'm sure it would work out well in the end. But I'm like, is that the game I want to play right now? Now, because I've got the benefit of hindsight and your lessons and other lessons of people that we know, I'm like, is that the game I want to open myself or make myself susceptible to? Nah. No. I just want to acquire and just make sure that other acquisitions don't get in the way.
Well, to go even deeper than that, we had a time where we were doing the accumulator. We found a property we loved, absolutely loved, really perfect deal. We did it subject to finance, only to go to the bank and say the only way you can acquire this is with a 30% deposit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for this lender, that was their term on being able to acquire it, which, to be transparent, it was actually a unit block. So when we got to that, we were expecting 20% and standard terms. But when we got hit with that, we had to make a decision. Are we going to take on a less than ideal structure to purchase this noting that it's like that's 10% extra we're putting in that we had planned to use on the next deposit.
Yeah.
So how's this all going to play out? So we ended up having to put 30% down on this unit block, which from memory, it was about 700 grand roughly. I think it was 680 or 700 the purchase. So it was a substantial amount. Like 10% of that was another $70,000. We came up with the cash, did it, got the finance through, then had to refinance it later to get that 10% back out to put into the deposit of the next property.
And that just takes time. Like, whilst that whole process of purchasing, settling, finding tenants, letting the tenant lease settle in until you can go back to the banks to refinance, and then the process of refinancing, like that would have been at least a 9-month, 12-month process.
It was, roughly I would say it was about 9 months.
Totally.
And do you know what's fascinating in that? It was the same bank that ended up refinancing it to 80%.
Of course it was.
I was like, why not just give us the loan we want at the beginning? Why not just like
That's a sucker punch. That's what that is. It's just,
but these are the things that come up when you go on these accumulator runs.
yeah, totally.
Because there's so many variables that you take for granted. Like you think, we can just do 20% deposits. It'll be easy to get finance. Inflation won't be an issue, or lending environment or rates won't change. And only in hindsight do I realize what a lending environment we were in.
Yeah.
And then you look at it now and go, that landscape has changed for a lot of people. It really has.
All right, fellow property investor. If you loved the value from this short video and wanted to know more about how you can win at property investing, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now. Alternatively, click subscribe and you'll never miss another one of these videos.